Prior to joining the Greater Madison Chamber, Zach was the director of the Wisconsin Angel Network, an early-stage investment organization focused on increasing equity investments in Wisconsin's entrepreneurs. Zach also served as the vice chair of public policy for the National Angel Capital Association. Previously, he served as deputy secretary of the Wisconsin Department of Commerce and served in the agency's senior policy and external affairs role. He advised the governor, commerce secretary, and the legislature on global trade and business development strategies with a heavy emphasis on expansion, investment, and entrepreneurial development. As an entrepreneur and small business owner, he was part of the leadership team of 3 startups. He was president and chief executive officer of Laundry 101, which in 2003 topped USA Today's best places to do laundry. I'm not sure what that says about Zach, but I've heard him before and I've always been impressed, and I'm sure you will be too. Has a BA in political science, concentration in management from Kent State, and he's here to talk to us.
Well, thank you for that wonderful introduction, and thank you for the invitation to be with you today. I saw a few people sneak out right before I got up, and so I don't know how to take that. You just come for the music, I guess. And I guess if I'm the keynote, then your musical guest is every note, right? Because that was an amazing performance. Thank you. I've been planning that all through lunch. So, the story I'm going to tell you today starts 3 years ago, actually this week, in this club. So I was your speaker during a horrible snowstorm. It was about a third of you who actually made it. I had a horrible head cold. And ran out of time, and I fear that I'm going to run out of time again today, but I will do my best. So if I could ask that you pay attention as much as I know you want to look at me, look at the slides, because the story will show itself on the slides. And at the time when I was here, I did a large PowerPoint. This PowerPoint itself has about 50 slides, so it will go fast. I have 3 teenagers. Their attention span's about 6 seconds on each slide. That gives me about 5 minutes, so I appreciate the extra 15 you're going to give me to slow down a little bit. So when I came last time, I said, you were debating and having a conversation about a speaker at Rotary a few weeks earlier who had said Madison is no longer special. And I came to say to you, it is special. But we had to decide who we aspired to be, what the city could become, because we certainly underperformed to our potential. I talked to you about Greater Madison being more than a place, but actually a goal. So the goal is to be a Greater Madison. And the story I will tell you today is a continuation of that story from 3 years ago that span not just these 2 events on the bookends, but 2 annual dinners at the Chamber and multitude of other events where this story has become part of our fabric of this community. It starts with a trip to Europe that I took last week, where I was stopped in the UK by a border guard who looks a lot like Jim Imhoff, doesn't he? But maybe that's what Jim did after selling the company. He's a UK border guard. Where the UK border guard asked me a very simple question. Madison, Wisconsin, never heard of it. Tell me about it. And I proceeded to tell a very reflexive story, one that I bet you tell every single time someone says, Madison, Wisconsin, tell me about it. So when someone asks you that question, what do you say? Just go ahead and shout it out. State capital. Well, lakes, I heard someone say crazy. That's a whole different talk. Research, Oscar Mayer. Well, for a few more months, yes. Cold. Opportunity, I heard. Thank you. Lakes and university. You guys actually hit every single one. Right. So what I said was, almost in an apologetic way, we're a state capital, have a great research university, and it's cold. And I said, just based on what you said, it's cold. It's a great research university. It's a state capital. You didn't say politics, although you said crazy, so I'll take those, so it'll go hand in hand. Athletics and recreation you didn't say, but I know it was all of your mind, especially after that victory last night against Indiana, that recreation and absolutely. And athletics play an important piece of who we are and how people perceive us to be. And the lakes and the natural beauty of this place are certainly part of that story. But there's more to the story, and the story that I asked you to think about last time I was here is where we were headed, and that's what I'm excited to talk to you about today is our brand is bigger. Those are pieces that we should absolutely embrace and love about ourselves, but there's a new story that's developed, and we need to tell a different story when people ask us, why Madison? So 4 trends that I want you to know about. The first of which is called sector density. Very sophisticated, but it's really about what industries are developing here. There's a myth about Madison that we are a three-legged stool, and in those three legs we have an equal part state government, university, and private sector. In reality, it would be one of the most lopsided stools that you ever sat on, because 3/4 of our jobs are actually private sector jobs. So telling that story is important, that we are not just a college town, we are not just a state capital town. This slide here talks about a thing called location quotient, and all location quotient, and without getting into economic development nerd speak, is our competitive advantage against other cities, like-sized cities. Anything above a 1 is an advantage. So these are the 9 or the 8 sectors that are driving our economy from a competitive advantage standpoint. When you overlay job creation on top of those, you see 4 of those sectors are actually creating significant jobs. So that would be biomedical, biotech, business and finance, information technology, and knowledge creation. Knowledge creation is the R&D spinouts that come out of the university, and lawyers, which there's a whole joke in there about knowledge creation and lawyers. I haven't figured it out yet, but if anybody gets it, let me know. I'll use it next time. But 2 of those stand out. The 2 largest are biomedical and bioscience, and the IT, information technology sector. These are places where we have a competitive advantage and we are creating jobs. And it makes sense. They're companies that you just think of. Promega, Exact Sciences, CDI, which was recently acquired by Fujifilm. But there's also the future. Each of these logos and companies that you may not have heard of raised over $1 million last year in Madison. It's also health tech. So immediately I say health tech, you think Epic, but it's other companies besides Epic. Each of these companies raised over $1 million last year right here in Madison. And Epic's important. A lot of what I will show you today has some kind of grounding in the success that Epic is finding. In fact, 27% of all net new jobs in Dane County are attributed directly to Epic. In itself, an amazing statistic, but invert that. That means 73%, nearly 3/4 of all the jobs that we are seeing created, the new jobs, the net new jobs, aren't related to Epic. So when someone tells you, well, your success is because of what Epic has going on, it actually is not true. It's companies like Google and Amazon and Zendesk and Microsoft, all multinationally publicly traded companies who have elected to invest in Madison, quietly in some cases, but are growing office here because they believe not that their best opportunity is to recruit our talent, but that their best opportunity is to invest in the talent, keep it here because it will add to their bottom line and the return to their investors. It's also in the sector of gaming. So video games, if you have grandkids or kids, you know that this is a place where they spend all of their time. My kids have moved from me being able to control the Xbox to now they just do it on their phone. So now I don't know what they're doing in controlling it. But there's a sector growing in this area as well. And in fact, Time and Apple's Game of the Year in 2015 was designed in Madison, Wisconsin, called Prune. It's a great game. You should look at it. All done by an independent designer and developer. And all of that leads to the designation last year. So the research was done in December of 14, but wasn't released until 2015. The Department of Labor released this map that talks about the density of software development in the United States. Madison has the second highest density of software developers anywhere in the country. That might not mean anything to you. You might think, well, that's interesting. What does that mean? It means that 2.6% of all US jobs in that sector are in Madison, Wisconsin. And that might not seem impressive to you, but when you think about we are 1/5 of 1% of the US population, and in fact, other than IT, we overperform in no other category. We pretty much punch at our weight everywhere else when it comes to industry sector alignment. And what's more important is the 3.5, which is the state of Wisconsin. When you add in the rest of the states, about another 1% of the US market share for that sector happens to reside in the rest of the state. 3.8% is manufacturing. That just tells you how powerful this is. When you think about us as a manufacturing state, and we constantly talk about the state of a place that produces high quality goods and then exports them because the world needs what we produce, the same thing is happening in software, and almost to an equal percentage proportion. The second trend is talent. Madison's growing. In the next 20 years or so, we're going to see about 50 to 60,000 more people. Again, if you stop to think about that, you might think, well, that's not that much growth. But it actually is when you think about where do you house, employ 50 to 60,000 more people. And that's not Dane County, that's just city of Madison proper. And the in-migration is coming from everywhere in the country. But specifically, we're seeing it from places of much higher population. So people who are used to living in New York City or Chicago or Minneapolis or Boston and Philadelphia are seeing a place where they can find something similar to what they grew up with or what they expect. And so the story of the boomerang, which when I first moved here 17 years ago, this is the story I always heard. It played out on the cover of Madison magazine and in John Roach and Neil Heinen's columns, and everyone reported about it and talked about it as a source of pride. What we said was, you came here, you lived here or came here to go to school, you moved away to get your business chops, and then you came back because it was a great place to raise a family. That was our source of pride. That's what we told everybody. We're a boomerang city. People come back. Our kids come back. There's a whole new story developing, and it's an acorn story. That acorns are falling from these trees, these digital trees of these great companies that have started to locate here and grow here, and those acorns are taking root in our firm soil. People are no longer leaving, they're actually importing people. And in fact, in the last 8 years, Madison has gained more than 10,000 20 to 40-year-olds, which is a very important workforce demographic, particularly when you think about the state of Wisconsin lost 44,000 people in that same demographic during the same time period. And they're staying, right? The MO on millennials is they don't buy houses, that they rent, that they are in a sharing society, that they don't actually want to have roots. But Bloomberg put out this report a few months ago. It said there are 10 cities in the country that are bucking the trend. 10 cities where people who are in the millennial demographic are buying homes. And in fact, in the last 9 months, nearly 50% of all new mortgages in Dane County come from people in the millennial demographic. So they're coming here and then they're staying here and investing in our community. The other thing we find out is their jobs. And this is a quote from Brookings that was in a report that was recently put out that says mid-level STEM jobs in places like Madison, Wisconsin, and Pittsburgh. I left Pittsburgh in there because I didn't want to put the ellipses and have you go, what did he cut out? So I wanted the definitive period. But Brookings Institute says that STEM jobs, so science, technology, engineering, and math jobs in Madison, have a median open availability on the market of 1 day. Silicon Valley, 78 days. Austin, Texas, 47 days. We have the talent. We're connecting it to the employers. People are finding work here, which makes them want to stay. What else is happening, though, is that when you overlay that with wages, you think, well, tight work, if you have a tight market, wages will be higher. But there's a lag in the wage demographic, or the wage profile for us, that shows that we are actually in the 56th position nationally when it comes to wages and STEM jobs. So we're getting all the talent and we're not yet paying for it, which is a great place to be when you're thinking about an economy. Madison's future is becoming more diverse, so our demographics are changing. If you look at the trend lines in people of color, you can see the multiplier effect that's happening significantly over the traditional white non-Hispanic demographic. And that comes to a question about equity or equality. And we use the word equity, and I think it's the right word, because equity is about ownership when you think about business. Equality just means fairness. We're talking about a seat at the table, not being given one because we want you to feel like you're our equal when it comes to business, but being given one because you own a place at that table that no one can take away from you. And it's an important piece because as much as I'll talk about the upside and the shiny side of what's going on in Madison and the reason to be hopeful and optimistic and certain of our specialness, there's also something that we have to get right. And that is this question of making sure that Madison works for everyone. We ask every politician that comes in for a chamber endorsement, Madison will fail in 20 years if X, or will succeed if X. And the answer on this one is Madison will fail if we don't get this right. This is another Brookings study that shows like-sized cities, every red line is a city of like size of us. Lower is better on this one. This is income segregation inside your community. Madison's the blue line. We're about as high as you can get. We're 1 point away from being one of the worst when it comes to income segregation. Now, there's another slide that shows that we've done a really good job of not making it racial. But it's something that we need to be mindful of because the line between these two profiles can change on you very quick. And we have to be mindful of it and be paying attention to it if we hope to live to our potential. The third is reputation. And this is one of the things that I talked to you about last time, which was about telling the story. What's going on in Madison and amplifying the story. In 2004, Forbes did an article about cities that are winning the battle for information jobs. It's what you expect. San Jose, San Francisco, Boston, Austin, Texas, every one of these makes national headlines. What you didn't expect is Madison, Wisconsin to be number 5. It sent shockwaves through the sectors and the industries of saying, what are we missing in Madison? Steve Case, the founder of America Online, did a tour called Rise of the Rest. His thesis is that Detroit was once Silicon Valley, and that there will be a new Silicon Valley. And in fact, it will occur off the coasts and probably in the heartland, in the mid part of the country. He did a tour of cities that he thought could be those next innovation hubs. Madison, the first stop on that leg. Fast Company did an article about why startups love Madison, Wisconsin. Just this year, or just a few months ago, in 2015, a report came out from Milken saying Madison was one of the best performing cities economically in the country. In fact, one of only 2 cities in the Midwest to crack the top 25, us in Grand Rapids. And you'll see there that we are 11th for high-tech sector growth. In fact, we outpaced the rest of the country by 18% from 2009 to 2014. 2,000 new jobs were created in company management. That's a multiplier of more than, it's a multiplier effect that beats every other metro in this country except for 4. On the asset side, they said we have high consumer spending, we are creating wealth, disposable income. On the liabilities, and I'll enlarge that for you, cuts in state funding to the University of Wisconsin-Madison. Here's a national respected publication highlighting to the world that a city that's on the upward swing has risk if we do things that damage one of our economic engines in UW-Madison. We talk a lot about where money comes from and how we get more money, other people's money. Venture capital, not a big thing in Wisconsin. In fact, Madison still lags significantly when it comes to bringing other people's money, especially investment money, to help create the next generation of companies. But when you do it by per capita, which is almost how you have to do it, so you can't just take big cities and say, what did they bring in? You have to take and look at per capita. The coast still reigns supreme. But Madison, in a report that came out yesterday, ranks 14th in the nation in venture capital per capita. Someone asked me the question the other day, it said, how do you get these 2 designations so close together? How is it possible? And so one of those designations is another Milken Institute study, did the best cities for successful aging. So best place to grow old in the country. Number 1, Madison, Wisconsin. The takeaway, again, you'll see one of the things that they talk about in the strengths of it, quality education and intellectual engagement at the University of Wisconsin. Almost in the same exact time frame, Inc. magazine listed the 10 best cities for young entrepreneurs, Madison, Wisconsin, number 7. So how do you get best place to grow old and the best place to start a business if you happen to be young, all in the same designation? They too talk about higher education and proximity of our education and attainment. Finland holds the world's reign for STEM graduates as part of the population. It's a source of pride for them. If you ever go to Finland, they are constantly bragging about the density of STEM that they have. And they have every right to brag. If you look at the bottom line there, or if you look at the bottom line, they've got, Finland has 22% of STEM jobs, and the share of their population comes out to the graduation in that important demographic of in the 20s to 30s is about 1.75, I think is what it is. Look at Madison, Wisconsin. If Madison were to be able to be pulled out from the rest of the country, we top the list and are only behind the Golden Triangle and the Research Triangle in Raleigh-Durham. Again, showing you what's going on here when it comes to the graduation. 4th is wealth creation. That we have been in a historic mode in this community that was a wealth preservation mode. And the Chamber's been just probably perpetuated and been just as guilty and responsible for that. One of the things that we have thought about as a Chamber is, how do you get back to the days of where you think about wealth creation, community wealth creation, disposable income? How do you get back to that place where you're not just thinking about preserving wealth because we're living the good life? And what you're seeing since we last spoke, just in the last few years, all of these organizations, these are nonprofits and community organizations that are tied to some of our largest institutions like the Madison College and the UW, who are all building an infrastructure and an ecosystem around creating new wealth, new opportunity, and new companies in our community. So what now? What does all this mean? A book was handed to Governor Walker in 2010 by the owners of Ashley Furniture. And Governor Walker read the book, and it became a manifesto for him on his jobs promise. Governor Walker took this book and gave it to every single one of his cabinet members and said, read it, learn it, know it, this will drive our agenda. I read it too. It wasn't given to me by the governor, but I read it too. And in there's an important quote in there that says, if someone were to ask the author, from all of the data that you have studied so far, where the next economic breakthrough will come from, the answer that he would give you is between the intersection of the forces in cities, great universities, and powerful local leaders. That's Madison, Wisconsin. We are the epitome of what this book and what people are starting to think about is how you win the coming jobs war. So as we start to think about the story, it's less about the athletics of the Badgers. It's less about we happen to be a college town. And it's something to think about when you say town versus city and what image you give people. But the story that we want to start to tell is that the apple falls very far from the tree. That when we talk about the UW and its impact on us, every one of those reports that I went through, whether it was about talent, whether it was about industry sectors, had some relationship back to the university, whether it was a report that said it was because of the university and educational attainment, whether it was because of EPIC or Promega or CDI, all who have relationships and were spun out of the university. It's an important part of the state's economic engine and certainly an important part of our economic engine. A book that was written by the Chamber over 100 years ago, reprinted in 2013 by this organization, has become a great manifesto for us as we think about what the future should be. You can actually read this book and imagine Madison today and think that the founders that wrote this book were writing about today. They talked about an imperfect city. It said not a perfect city was a chapter, and we are no means a perfect city. Don't misconstrue my enthusiasm of where we're headed to be a statement about perfection. We certainly know about the imperfections of our city and that we need to address. We are a future city, and we should be proud of that fact. It is special. It is one of the cities that is on the upswing and has tremendous potential. But most importantly, we need to learn to brag. The book said facts but not boasts, because we were too humble to say this is what's going on in our fair city over 100 years ago. It's now time for us to start to brag, even if it's a humble brag, about what's going on. So next time, when somebody asks you what's going on in Madison, do what Mikkel Sven did when he was on TechCrunch, a very popular TV show on the West Coast about technology companies. When he was asked, why are you in Madison, he said, the interviewer said, you're in Helsinki, you're in Singapore, you're in Shanghai, you're in Tokyo, you're in Ireland, or Dublin, and you're in San Francisco. Why are you in Madison, Wisconsin? And he said, because I believe being in Madison puts me at the ground floor of the next big thing. So someone asks you next time, what's going on in Madison, or what is Madison, say it's the next big thing. If someone says to you, what's going on in Madison, what should I know about Madison? Tell them that we're a place that solves the world's problems, and we have good beer. If someone asks you, if nothing else, what's going on in Madison, tell them this is a place that imports the world's money, imports the world's talents, and exports knowledge and solutions to the world's problems. That is our story. That is where we're headed. That is what we aspire and what we have certainly are capable of being, is the place that solves the world's problems. Thank you. Questions?
Good job.
Have a mic
Thanks.
right here. It'll find you. Or where? Where's the mic? Right here. Yeah. Okay, so I'm over here.
Okay. This is Rachel Krinsky. Thank you, Zach. I will promptly change my answer when people tell me what to say about Madison. But I wanted to return to your acorn image because I like that. I like it better than the boomerang. But I'm also aware that besides all of the other inequities we're aware of, and I think you know this too, middle-class professionals are not finding fertile soil here. In fact, many of the people of color who come here with all of that talent are leaving here as quickly as they can possibly get out. And I'm just curious what you have to say about that.
Yeah, it's a great point. And to me it is, there are a lot of organizations doing a lot of great work, including Rachel's, who are thinking about the transition from poverty to sustainability. What we have to also not lose sight of is the question of how do you build and sustain a middle class of color? How do you build and sustain an entrepreneurial class of color? How do you build and sustain an executive class of color? All those things are going to be very important because you saw the demographics, you see the changing landscape for this community. If we're not thinking about job creation and particularly the retention of the world's talent once it gets here, we'll do it at our own failing. It's a great point, something the Chamber Board some of you are on the Chamber Board, are certainly friends with the members of the Chamber Board, has committed itself to, which is that we believe one of the roles of the business community is to be thinking about wealth creation. That I could show you, and you know, the disparity numbers on per capita income when it comes to race in our community, that instead of trying to move per capita income from 87,000 to 89,000 on the top end for people of white color, we have 28% or $28,000 for someone who's black. We have to be thinking about that's where our focus is not trying to get wealth creation at the highest level, not moving people from 87 to 89, but moving people from $28,000 a year to $78,000 to $87,000 a year to $89,000. And I'd tell you, it has to be a concerted effort. We have to be intentional about it. It cannot be something that you just do in passing. You actually have to employ people of color. You have to mentor people of color. You have to promote people of color. You have to work for people of color. You have to shop at businesses that are owned by people of color. This is not just somebody else's responsibility. It's all of our responsibility.
One more? We've got one more question.
Sure.
Hi, this is Mark Ferrer from Dane County Cultural Affairs, Dane Arts. Thank you, Zach. One question. All the arenas that you mentioned do really great things, and I know a lot of these businesses and the people that work there. Does the Chamber have the courage to change the language from STEM to STEAM? Because all these cats I know are highly creative and innovative. I got an MBA from UW-Madison in corporate finance. There wasn't anything about creativity and innovation in that. Right. So a lot of these folks are artists on a lot of different levels, and it would be great if the Chamber had the courage to say STEAM instead of STEM. Is that possible?
I think it's absolutely, it's a great point. I think if you try to figure out where the line between innovation, creativity, and imagination is, you're going to drive yourself crazy. In fact, I would argue that other than our own constructs, that innovation belongs to business, creativity belongs to artists, and imagination belongs to kindergartners. We've sort of only created that in our mind. And I only use STEAM, Mark. I mean, I agree with you 100%. Go to a place like 100 State, where you see the collision of industry and art all sort of playing itself out. That creativity and innovation and the human collision which creates those two things absolutely has to include the arts. I use STEM not because it's just part of our lexicon, but it's because that's what the report said. But I agree with you, and I will do better about adding the A in next time.
One more over here, Zach.
Hi, Zach. I'm Cedric Ellis. I'm a guest of Doris. I'm fairly new to Madison in that I moved to Madison about a year ago. However, I've been working in Madison for about 10 years. One of the things that you said in one of your slides was income disparity, and you said it wasn't necessarily along race lines. What I'm curious to hear... The
segregation's not along race.
Pardon me?
The segregation isn't along race.
The segregation.
The disparity certainly is, but
okay.
The physical segregation is not.
I wanted to hear a little bit more about the disparate impact in terms of people of color, because I believe the segregation, if my eyes have not deceived me in my 10 years of being here, I'd like to hear a little bit more about that disparity in terms of its disparate impact on people of color.
Absolutely. So I appreciate the question and the opportunity to clarify that. If I misstated that or went too fast over it, the point I was making that Brookings made, which is many cities have segregation based on race. We're not one of those. In fact, the CVB, the Convention and Visitor Bureau, Deb Archer had two experts in yesterday. We were doing a roundtable discussion on envisioning of what destination marketing might look like. And they said, you know, the new hot thing for millennials is getting into ethnic neighborhoods and seeing great restaurants and great social spaces. What are your ethnic neighborhoods? And it was one of those questions of, well, there aren't really, the historically ethnic neighborhoods aren't the kind of ethnic neighborhoods. There isn't, you know, a Norwegian neighborhood. There isn't, there isn't a Latino neighborhood. You could argue the South Side's got a more recent development that's had some of that. But the point, Cedric, is not that we're doing a great job, but that our segregation is along income lines. So poor people live one place, rich people live another place, and less about people of color live in one spot and white people live another. But to your point, and so I'll address it because you asked, there is a significant disparity when it comes to income and a lot of other attainment questions. And so the Race to Equity report talked about, mostly about educational attainment, but it really has to be stretched to be talking about opportunity. It's an opportunity gap, not just an achievement gap. And that's the focal point that we think is that by really focusing as the business community on the future of building a middle class, not just recruiting it, but retaining it, I once told a story, and I'll say it here with risk it will come across right. If my board sent me to Silicon Valley tomorrow to go recruit a young hotshot CEO out of Silicon Valley, I would know the pitch. I couldn't promise you I'd get him, but I got the pitch down. I could go and I could say, this is why you want to be here. Look at all these great indicators. Look at the next opportunity for you. Look at the next sector that's developing. Look at the next job. You're going to be part of great teams and great innovators. If you sent me to Atlanta or to Chicago and said, our next CEO for X company is this person of color, go sell them on Madison, I don't know what that story sounds like. And that's a scary proposition for me because the future will be more diverse.
Got one over here.
Hello, Zach, Linda Baldwin. How are we going to grow new political leadership in this city and in this county and in this state? I mean, many of you who are in new positions within the business side in this community have really made some great progress. Thank you. Congratulations. How do we get that going on the political side of things?
I wouldn't want to speak specifically other than to say, I think if you talk about Rachel and you talk about Bob and you talk about Renee and you talk about other people who were on the recent Madison magazine cover, and where they declared for us that there was a new generation of leaders, we're getting a lot done, not as political leaders. In fact, I think we probably get more done outside of politics. And it's a good question. I don't know the answer to it other than to say that we should make sure that the demographic change that we're seeing, and it was an amazing election last time around to have, for the first time ever, have 3 people of color on the city council, but start thinking about, when we talk about working, hiring, promoting, mentoring, working for, shopping at, we should also be thinking about identifying people who look like Madison, and particularly look like future Madison, and encouraging them, giving them the confidence to say, you could be mayor, you could be an alder, you could be county executive. We have to build a whole new farm team. And that farm team not just has to understand Madison, but we have a new challenge, which is Madison's role inside the rest of the state. Because we're not just selling ourselves now to the rest of the country. I told this to a couple Republican operatives the other day. I said, the challenge for me was, I've been so focused for 3 years how we build a brand to sell us internationally and to the rest of the country. I now find myself having to think about how I sell us back to the rest of the state. What is this economic engine? Because I never thought in a million years that we would be in a great designation in Milken's report for best performing cities and then be called out for the rest of the world to see that the assault, the attack on our flagship research institution could be our downfall. And the rest of the state has to realize that companies like Epic, which are now outside of regional retail and regional healthcare, so take out Gunderson Lutheran and take out Aurora and take out Menards and Walgreens and Walmart. Epic is the largest single employer of people in Wisconsin in the private sector. And I was in Milwaukee recently and I said, that is Harley Davidson, Johnson Controls, Manitowoc Company, and SC Johnson Wax, and Mercury Marine, all combined. Wisconsin people. Johnson Controls has 40,000 people worldwide, but people in Wisconsin. All right, great, thank you.
Thank you, Zach. So go out and brag, and remember Pee Wee Reese said, it ain't bragging if you can do it.